energy usage they're thinking is going to pretty significantly affect our planet. And
agents need more of it than any workload previously, but it's at a different unit of scale.
what are you most excited about when the cost of intelligence approaches zero?
Right now, to tame either inflation or improve economic growth, we need some help.
Do you ever see a future in which the operating system is similar, where there's maybe no or very little underlying traditional code?
Every layer of the tech stack has to be reimagined.
You had previously said the software, the application layer is going to collapse down into agents. And what does that mean for vertical SaaS companies? All right, Satya, thanks for chatting with me. Congratulations on everything you announced at Build. Yeah, I had a few questions. You've overseen very successful major transitions at Microsoft Cloud, the adoption of open source, and now we're kind of in this next one. With the rise of these incredibly powerful AI agents, how are you thinking about investing in that while also maintaining your kind of the current product suite that you have and the major changes that are coming to it?
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks so much for being at our developer conference. The way I think about it is, first, you have to embrace what's new, right? And that's where I think even, now that we're even 2 to 3 years in, depending on how you count, into this, AI era and this agentic web era, the patterns of what it means to build agents, build apps is becoming clearer, right? So you have to really go look at the tech stack that you have, that you built maybe for a previous workload, now needs to be really thought of from first principles for the new workload, right? So take even the infrastructure layer, right? Obviously, we are very, very proud of the fact that we have 70 regions of Azure all around the world. And then you say, wow, we now need to retrofit them or fit them to become AI factories, right? That's kind of what you need to do. Turns out that if you take even an app like ChatGPT or Copilot, it definitely needs a lot of GPUs or AI accelerators, but it also needs everything else. It needs, in fact, tons of storage, both during training and inference. It needs a ton of compute, regular compute, not AI accelerated compute, in order to be able to, for example, have the environments for agents. So interestingly enough, it turns out what we built over the last 15 years may be more relevant now because agents need more of it than any workload previously. But it's at a different unit of scale. So that's kind of what we have to do at the infra layer. Same thing with data, right? Take data and you say, well, data has been always about, take a database, you said that's where you schematize people, places, things. But now you can bring the intelligence layer to the data, right? A reasoning engine straight in. Like one of the coolest demos we showed was this Postgres, which is so modular that you can now mix and match in your SQL query an LLM response, right? I mean, think about the query plan you can generate. So I feel that every layer of the tech stack has to be reimagined, but it also means we can take some of the best work we've done over the last 15 years and have it compound for our developers so that they can get the benefits of it. So that's how we're thinking about it, right? Which is, how do we make sure we think about every layer of the tech stack from a first principles perspective for the new AI workloads that are being built, and then really stitch it together so that it meets the real world needs of customers.
Yeah, and so the end users, especially for products that people are so familiar with, Office 365, these products, I assume, are going to be changing so rapidly. So what is that acceleration and the change in the product?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, right? If I look at Office, right, there are, I'd say, 3 modes of Microsoft 365. The first is the brand new mode, which is I have this new UI for AI, which literally is this new scaffolding, which has chat, which has search, which has notebooks, which is a place where I collect all these heterogeneous collections of data and do things like podcasts and audio overviews and all of that. I have agents, right? Like these researcher and analysts. So these are things that I can delegate tasks to and so on. It's so exciting to have all of that. And I even have the Copilot Studio. So in other words, I can build agents, right? So that's the new thing, right? Just, like I now have an UI for AI and agents. Here's the other interesting thing. Teams takes all of that into multiplayer mode, right? All of those agents are available to me in my channel, in my meeting, right? So Teams becomes the scaffolding in which all of the AI now is working with me in multiplayer mode. And the third mode is my heads down. Just like how in GitHub Copilot with VS Code, I'm heads down coding away, but I have agents that I can use. I'm heads down on an Excel spreadsheet and I have, my Copilot chat right there, right? That is like having a data scientist next to me while I'm analyzing a spreadsheet. While I'm writing a document, I have a researcher right there. The idea is we've turned every Office canvas into an IDE with chat. Essentially, if you think about it that way. So in some sense, I feel like the value of even the M365 system now has gotten to be more compounded because of intelligence getting built into all of these layers.
So I want to continue on that note a little bit. You had previously said the software, the application layer is going to collapse down into agents. And I made a video about it, called it Saas Dead. It garnered a lot of attention. That was really cool thoughts about it, but I want to hear, the assertion is there's going to be the agent layer, and then under that there's going to be the grounded database that the agents can read and write from. And what does that mean for vertical SaaS companies? How do they prepare themselves for this future?
Yeah, like all of us. I think the way to go about it, even the demo we showed today, right? Literally there was Dynamics 365 with essentially an MCP server that was used by Copilot Studio to orchestrate a multi-agent application that spanned CRM and many other systems of record, and then completed essentially the orchestration of a complex business process, right? That seems to be here and now, right? It's kind of clear as day that when you go about thinking about business process and business applications, you have to compose yourself into something like that. And so, that will mean pretty radical change if all you thought was, hey, I'm the system of record or system of engagement or what have you, and it's just about workflows on top of my data, and that's the scope. That's just not going to persist. So I think we have to all be open to participating in what is this new orchestration layer in the agentic web that will be will have multiple backends, right? Your SaaS application will be one backend. You better support something like MCP in order to be able to participate in the agentic web. And then maybe even something like NL Web could even reduce the friction of all these connectors, right? Because if you think about enterprises, you have a significant sort of friction in how connectors work. Something like NL Web could be massive change even inside the enterprise. And so I feel like, yes, I think SaaS applications we built may have to radically change in order to adapt themselves for this future.
Yeah, and so these let's just say these SaaS companies, do you think they're going to be curators of this ground truth data for their customers, and then the agents will be provided by platform companies like Microsoft?
I sort of think about, it's unclear to me exactly how it all shakes out, because in some sense, all of us overstate the importance of one thing that we have today, but the reality is when these platform shifts, the value will anyway get created somewhere else, right? So this is where, at the end of the day, what's the job to be done? The job to be done is to complete a business process. It's not about any one system of record and its curation. Or it's not about any one agent or one workflow. It's about the entirety of it, right? So that to me is where the water is flowing. And the question is, how do you flow with it versus thinking that somehow I have this moat and I'm going to hold on to it, or I'm going to build some sort of facade around it, which has an agent head or what have you, but it's not the comprehensive view of what the customer in this case needs to get done.
Yeah, I really like that you said, different types of agents are going to be talking together, different databases, it doesn't really matter, it's just an abstraction layer. So that all sounds really exciting. Another thing you mentioned, you had said in an interview that when you hire somebody, an employee, you're hiring them in the future and their basket of agents, which is fascinating to me. But I wanted to get some clarity on that because it seems like most likely the company, the employer, is going to want to own that IP, the agents, just like they would own traditional IP. So maybe you can add some clarity.
Actually, that's correct. In fact, what you said is sort of our view, right? If I look at even today's announcements, because what is the intellectual property of a company, right?
Right.
And even the work product of any one of us at work is the company's property. And so that, I think, is going to be the case even with agents. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why we extended the rails, right? Where now agents have an Entra ID. You can manage conditional access for these agents, just like you do with people inside of an organization. Purview, right? Another super important thing. If agents are going to have access to data, it needs to be subject to the same data protection and data rights. And so we are going to, and security, by the way, you're going to manage the agent environment like an endpoint. So that's why Defender is going to make sure that there is no credential theft or what have you. So absolutely, thinking of all of the things we've done from identity management and security for people and their IT infrastructure is going to be done for agents and their IT infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also suspect a lot of people are going to build their own personal agents for their personal life. And maybe, do you see a future in which they are also bringing those personal agents into work?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, the system where you bring your own personal agents, right, has to be done in such a way that these two worlds don't have the data leakage, right? So that's the issue, right? Which is, let's even take the simple thing, which is, hey, my email and my corporate email. Today, they're two segregated things. They're two identities, and we know how to separate state out. For both privacy reasons and for also intellectual property reasons, right? Both of those are helpful. I think something like that. That's why even we believe in Entra and Microsoft account, right? So that's why we have Copilot and Microsoft 365 Copilot. Conflating the two, even in terms of the user model, can be very confusing. The reason why I pin Edge with two profiles is helpful because I do it with Microsoft account when as a user, as an individual, and I do this with Entra when I'm working at Microsoft, and it's a helpful demarcation to keep this, the mental model simple. Otherwise, I think by conflating it all, I think you can really get very tangled.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask you maybe a question about your vision. So the cost of intelligence does seem to be dropping rapidly, hopefully approaching zero. I think it's going to be such a fascinating world in the future. What do you think, what use cases do you think are going to open up? What are you most excited about when the cost of intelligence approaches zero?
Yeah, I mean, to me, ultimately, right, when I look out there in the world, do we need more abundance of something like technology, like intelligence that can then ultimately drive productivity and economic growth? Absolutely, right? I look around and say, man, right now to tame either inflation or improve economic growth, we need some help. Yeah. So this is, high time. So if you sort of take that thing and take sort of the example we even shared at our developer conference as to what Stanford Medicine was able to do for something real high stakes, right? Like, tumor board meetings and oncology and cancer care. They were able to take all this technology and apply it in a real way where it was a multi-agent framework they used in Foundry to orchestrate, pathology, clinical trials, PubMed data, ultimately to have a better tumor board meeting and then have the data and the information from that go into PowerPoint, into a teaching class or into Teams for people to collaborate. That is, to me, what needs to happen. Healthcare is 20% of our GDP, close to a lot of the expenses in this workflow. And so if every provider out there can start improving their patient care and outcomes and reducing cost using AI, that's going to have a profound impact in our societies. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I think the healthcare use cases I'm extremely excited about. Hyper-personalized healthcare. I already used ChatGPT Copilot to answer questions about my own personal health. It is very, very exciting. And also, some of the research that you showed off, the immersion cooling, right? That was
discovered. Yeah, it's so cool.
Material science. There's just so much there. So anecdotally, I've heard from some of the younger generation that they're either avoiding AI altogether or maybe just using it lightly, and specifically because the energy usage they're thinking is going to pretty significantly negatively affect our planet. And so how does Microsoft think about that? What words of confidence would you give to them?
Yeah, first of all, the fact that the younger generation cares about this deeply is so inspiring, quite frankly, because at some level, it is sort of the right push for all of us to be able to say, okay, whatever we are creating is fundamentally helping with these outcomes that matter to us in society, right? Whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it's access to financial services, whatever the domain is. Ultimately, it's economic growth, it's economic prosperity and abundance. So let's take that as the first thing, which is we're not doing this just for some tech accomplishment, but we're doing it to solve the challenges of people and planet. Then the second part is also important, which is we've got to do it in a sustainable way, right? It's sustainable abundance. And then if that is the case, then one of the equations I go back to is it's tokens per dollar per watt, right? The fact that we are able to use software, right, as the most malleable resource to use energy in the most efficient way to generate the most amount of abundance, which in turn then improves health and education and other outcomes, is a good thing. And we just have to stay on it, right? The reality is all of tech is what, 2%, 3% of sort of the grid power today or total power consumption. So it's minor, but yes, it'll double. And so if it needs to double, it needs to have the social permission to double. It needs to create a lot more value in the real world. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I feel like we as a tech industry need to be anchored on not just one product of ours that everybody's using for doing fun things. It has to be in healthcare, in material science, in broad knowledge work in a small business getting productivity, right? Because that's what will give us the social permission to continue to use the scarce resource called energy, do that in a sustainable way. We are some of the biggest buyers of alternative energy. In fact, you could say the greatest subsidy out there for new projects is from people like us. We really want to make sure we continue to push on it, but ultimately deliver tokens per dollar per watt, such that it creates economic prosperity.
I'm glad you said that. I'm going to tell the folks who are very nervous about the environmental impacts what you said, and I'll show them this video, so thank you. There's definitely a major shift in computing architecture happening right now. The line between deterministic and non-deterministic parts of the architecture are kind of getting blurred. I saw this really cool demo a few months ago where they recreated the game Doom using a diffusion model. Every single frame was predicted. Yeah. Do you ever see a future in which the operating system is similar, where there's maybe no or very little underlying traditional code?
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like we had a similar one, like this Muse model that we built was a world action model that we had built, but we trained it on gaming data, and it starts to do essentially you can have an Xbox controller as actions that are then used to generate the next scene, which is sort of pretty. It's kind of like robotics you can think of as like that, and gaming is like that, and so yes, everything is generated, so to speak. The operating system, to me, this idea that sometimes I think we even overstate the determinism of what we call deterministic systems, right? Because after all, if you take a software program, you can't prove it, right? I mean, that's sort of one of the fundamental challenges of computer science. Right. That and so therefore, I think yes, it's a stochastic system, but this stochastic system does need to work in deterministic ways that we can at least inspect. Quite frankly, what Elon said in the keynote when I interviewed him, he said, hey, we got to understand the physics of intelligence. Right. It's actually a good way to think about it, right? Which is we have to somehow get back to a place where when we stitch these complex systems, there is some way for us to understand the physics of these complex systems and then bound them, right? Sandbox them and what have you, right? I think that's what we will have to do even on an operating system. But when I look back at it, you take the coding agent that we just launched. Interestingly enough, the coding agent has an environment. Underneath GitHub Actions, you're really putting a virtual machine, and then you're really setting the boundaries of that virtual machine, right? Which is, hey, does it have internet access or not? You have to control it. If it's going to have access to tools with MCP servers, you have to control it. And then there's a full audit log of all of that. And so I think that's how we will learn how to essentially mix a deterministic system, so to speak, which is a software system that we built with a lot of imperative code and this agent to couple together and then have the interaction itself be something that we can monitor.
Yeah, so that's it's really cool because you said in the keynote we're kind of beginning the middle innings of this transition. So I really think it's a really interesting time to see where that blend of different types of software go. Thank you so much for meeting with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It's been
Such a pleasure. Thanks for coming and spending
you.
the time, and look forward to being in touch.